Hi, everybody. Okay, so let's get started on April 14th, 2026. This is day 2080, day since Richard was forcibly removed from his barracks room because he was a whistleblower. They forcibly removed him. He wasn't just any whistleblower, y'all. He was the whistleblower for this whole Jeffrey Epstein uh, evolved Iran-Contra pipeline um, that had infiltrated. Of course, the El Paso cartel became um, the ones that offered protection, the protection racket for this pipeline. And in 2019, when Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, and um, and the ranch closed down, um, you know, it just shifted all over, more so to El Paso and Fort Bliss. It was always there. El Paso is the epicenter, right? So, yeah, he was a whistleblower, the whistleblower, and they forcibly removed him. This is on Fort Bliss from his barracks room, took him down to the basement room, which is the arms room, a soundproof room, and they took his life. And then um, there was a time of dismemberment and taking his body off of Fort Bliss. Evidence indicates they harvested his organs and they trafficked his remains to across the border, international border, to Mexico. And we believe that his remains were disposed of at Plenitude Crematorium, owned by El Pasoans, the Purchase Ariano Caron family that are into oil and gas, right? They're into oil and gas and Cano Steel and restaurants, and they are part of the El Paso cartel, along with the narco philanthropists. And this was all organized to silence Richard because their bigger target, their main target was President Trump. And you see that, when you look at the evidence, you can clearly see, sorry, you can clearly see that they were targeting President Trump, and Richard stood in the way of that because he he was calling out what they were doing, and everything that they were doing, because they had infiltrated into his very unit. His very unit is part of the El Paso cartel. So that's the security, the CID and the DES, which is the Director of Emergency Services. It's the guy or the gal, the guy or the gal that handle the videos, right? The CCTV footage, the manage all of the gates, the gate guards, all of that, handles all the passes. So they needed the DES and CID and Richard's unit to do what they did. Okay. And it was an act of war. This is an act of war. And, you know, um, there's a lot of talk about President Trump calling out Pope Leo. And, I think he had a duty to do that. I don't, I don't know if Pope Leo understands that this was an act of war. The violence is so bad. It's an act of war. We're not covering up. We're not in the cover up mode anymore. Okay? That's not what we're doing, the looking the other way, the turning the other cheek. And I understand the turning the other cheek. I've been doing it for over 5 years, turning the other cheek to prepare for this lawsuit, this epic lawsuit, um, because you have a duty as a Christian to seek justice, to seek God's justice. And so I believe that President Trump has a duty to call out the Pope when the Pope is trying to hinder the United States getting justice. And in this case, right now with Iran and the whole pipeline, it's for Richard. And to hinder that with looking the other way when looking the other way has turning the other cheek, has not sought justice, has not sought justice, has sought um, maybe some bribes, maybe some uh, protecting the priests, the pedophile priests, maybe, for all the wrong reasons. I don't want to put it in the Roman Catholics Pope's mouth why they did what they did, but being a faithful Christian, and I believe that's what's going on here, is we have to call it out. We have to call out the weakness of the church, protecting the 501c3. You see, the 501c3 can be a real stumbling block for the church. I think the whole tax structure is a real stumbling block for the church. I'm not an expert, so I can't comment more on it. But I know that they will avoid any kind of controversy to not get in not risk losing their 501c3. So, because that can be a weapon used against them, right? If they if anyone wants to speak out against, 500,000 children being trafficked, and priests that have violated their promises to God and defiled themselves. They were all put in the pipeline of the child trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, that New Mexico pipeline to El Paso. And that's why the El Paso diocese had to file for bankruptcy. It was just outnumbered, and they didn't rehabilitate. Apparently, they didn't rehabilitate. So they should have been handed over for justice. So what they did to Richard was an act of war, not an act of peace. And I think that President Trump was absolutely right, and a duty to call out the moral, hypocrisy. So there's a lot of other things that the Pope needs to address and answer for, for what has gone on in these years. And it's a very emotional thing, because right. I'm a Catholic. So it's very emotional, and but we're not going to be strong as Catholics if we don't seek justice and we don't act strong. Christ, we're on Easter, and Easter is all about God giving us power to become the sons of God. Are we to just go to heaven on flowery beds of ease while others fought on bloody seas? I mean, that's a great hymn. What, what they did to our son was an act of war. What they did to President Trump was an act of war. What they did to 500,000 plus children was an act of war. And I could go on and on and on with the fentanyl, with the fuel theft, with the weapons, and all everything that they've been doing. So, yes, this is, I think President Trump had a duty to call him out. And all of these other people that didn't say one word when they were holding up, when these enemies were holding up effigies of President Trump, when they were harassing us and threatening us. I mean, I can't even imagine everything that President Trump has been through, because the pictures that I get sent of him, to harass us, to try to weaken us so that we won't fight, that we won't go forward and do our investigation and find out what happened to our son and demand accountability and submit our epic lawsuit. They are just so bad. They put out a picture of President Trump as Jesus, or he posted up, one good picture of him. I mean, aren't we supposed to, what would Jesus do? We're supposed to emulate Jesus. They're all calling it blasphemy and this and that. I'm like, are you kidding me? Haven't you looked at the pictures they put up of him? He has to counter it. And I'm very glad it's in the discussion. Let us talk about blasphemy, please. Let us talk about what they did to these bodies, 400 bodies at Plenitude Crematorium. The sacrilege, what they did to God's creation. Yeah, let's get this out and not be weak on crime, but put on our full armor of God and be warriors against these demons. So, yeah, it's just like, wow, you really see people's true colors. And it really tells you, what are they so afraid of? They're so afraid of the U.S. selling oil in U.S. dollars after being attacked year after year after year, weakening our dollar, economically being robbed all the time. Have they been the robbers? Have they been the embezzlers? Have they been the ones with these rotten contracts that they get loads of money for doing nothing? And I know there's good contracts, but we have evidence, and of course, and I'm thinking of Woody Hunt, because Woody Hunt with the housing in Dover, he already settled for that, for bad contracts, not not doing what he was supposed to do, and that comes in the wake of Tony Gonzalez doing his retirement, right? Uh, Doing his retirement from Congress because of all of his shenanigans, um, and he started off doing something right. admitting that there needs to be an investigation into the contracts of the what is it, Hunt Company with the housing, that there was obvious fraud. And then the next thing you know, he's getting campaign donations and campaign fundraisers right there at Woody Hunt's house. I mean, it's so obvious how he turned, and he shouldn't have turned, because the next thing you knew, he turned in many other ways. And his own staffer, who wanted to know, when he thought, when he first thought how hot she was, um, and, left his family and had an affair with her. And next thing you know, she's not alive anymore by fire. Um, I mean, it just domino effects. One evil leads to another evil, because you turn the other cheek. Turning the other cheek does not mean giving up seeking for justice. It's doing it the smart way, not being, um, well, with these phone calls that we were getting for months, every day, these messages, these vile and vulgar, and the vile and vulgar messages were, um, what they showed is that the people that were threatening us and harassing us had access to our files, because they knew things about Richard and they knew things about our family members that nobody would know unless you had a historical file on us and that you were combing through it. And that can be pretty triggering. So I think the answer, and I don't want to answer uh, for everyone. I want to answer for me, for our family. I think not responding to the triggers, but um, having temperament and thinking through things and filing complaints, even though you know that you're filing with corrupt and compromised institutions and agencies. Um, but you've got to get it on the record, you see. You've got to get it on the record. And it's on the record. And when we filed these, okay, so the phone, the harassing and the threatening came from 4 phone numbers. We from burner phones. So you couldn't just like go onto the computer and do a reverse, and find out who's, doing this to you, right? We were able to trace these burner phones, and it was like a miracle. It was a miracle. It was like Nadal Baim and the CCTV footage and the cashier that totally, less than an hour after he went in there and said, Richard's been dismembered and he's dead over in Juarez. That's October 2020. Getting that information and being able to turn it into the FBI, and the FBI is freaking out. The whole chain of command is freaking out. Why? And then they lied to us. So you knew they were in on it because they're freaking out, instead of saying, this is great evidence. Let's go get them. Because they knew that what happened to Richard was an act of war. It was absolutely treasonous, traitors. It was an inside job, and the main target was election tampering. And if that, to stop President Trump from being reelected, if they had to kill people, they would do it. That's what that meant. It was election tampering with deadly force. And so when we got these numbers and we handed them in, they immediately stopped. The harassment immediately stopped because they knew that we knew that they were weaponizing government intelligence apparatus, government intelligence, asymmetric warfare tactics against a Gold Star family. Yeah. And we have saved that. And that is so important because it's huge evidence and we didn't get triggered. We stayed calm. We filed it all. And that is turning the other cheek, waiting strategically and through the legal system because they can try to manipulate and obstruct justice, but our God is a God of justice. The whole world cries out for justice, and they can't stop it. And justice is coming. And I can't tell you if I had a penny or a dollar, I should say a dollar, for every time someone has said, "Why are you doing this? It's not even worth it." They're going to get away with it. It's all for nothing. And I said to myself, and I didn't say it to them. Sometimes I said it to them, and I said, "Ye of little faith, ye of little faith." Because our God is a God of justice. And our job as Christians is to establish his justice on earth as it is in heaven. That is the chief end of man. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And we're letting these creeps, these demons get away because we are weak on crime. Exactly what President Trump said. And when that infiltrates into our church, it has to be called out. It has to be called out. Because now you have a bankrupt diocese. Now, who's that going to help? You have, and I don't even want to go into all of the terrible things that happened. But I will tell you this, that the Crucius Mayella family are Roman Catholic. So they say. That's where they got married. What priest in their right mind would marry them, knowing who they were and that they were under protection, that they were being hidden? In a very, not under protection because they were witnesses, because they were involved in a mass shooting. Now that's weak on crime. And the Walmart mass shooting is like the number one reason, and there's a lot of reasons, but the number one reason why Richard lost his life. Yes, justice is coming. So that, and I didn't mean to get emotional about that, but boy, it's all over the internet. And I just like, when did Christians, come on, We are not impotent. We have been given power. We don't have to wait for Jesus to come again. He came. He rose from the dead. He gave us power. And we need to wield that power. And that power is called justice, righteousness. It's just, yeah. So, and I'm so glad, and I hope that President Trump holds his own on that, because boy, those are hard arrows to take. Hard arrows to take. So, the other thing I did want to talk about the burner phones, because I was told it couldn't be done. It couldn't be done. We found a way to do it. We found a way to do it, and it stopped. Can you imagine how many years would we have had to put up with that group, with that, using the full power and purse of the United States government to be weaponized against the Gold Star family, wanting to know what happened to their son, where is their son, and get accountability. Can you imagine? That's why I know that justice is coming, because there's one miracle after the next in this whole case. One, hand of God here, hand of God here, hand of God here, all through this case. So, yeah, that's why I wanted to bring up those burner phones again. So the other is this voice. I put up this voice on this video. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. I'll have to put these on. Play this.
Navy warship 121. This is SEPA Navy station. You must alter course and go back to the Indian Ocean immediately. If you don't obey my order, you will be targeted. Out.
This is Coalition Warship 121, engaged in transit passage in accordance with international law. No challenge is attended to you.
U.S. Navy warship transiting in the vicinity 4J report and Oman Sea. This is SEPA Navy. This is SEPA Navy. Last warning, last warning, last warning.
He was close to High Island 4.
Attention all vessels, attention all vessels, attention all vessels in Oman Sea. This is Iranian SEPA Navy. If you see any warship in your vicinity, keep a distance more than 10 miles from them, because I'm ready to open fire on them without any warning. Navy warship 121. This is SEPA Navy station.
Okay, so when I listened to that, I thought, I live next to a family from Iran that spoke Farsi, Persian. We would have, believe it or not, the wife and the daughter, we would have Mary Kay parties together with some au pairs from Norway. So we would make fun of our different accents speaking English. And, so when I listened to this, I was like, and this was in Olney, Maryland, right right outside of DC, right outside of DC where we lived when years ago. And when I was listening to this, I was like, that is not Farsi. That's not Persian. That is not their accent. Who's who's speaking threats to the United States Navy in international waters? And I think that's a really good point about um, this whole recording, is that the Navy is saying we're in international waters. We have a right to be here. How can you threaten us in international waters? Right? That was really the main point that interested me about this video, is Iran is threatening a US Navy ship in international waters. But I think the bigger question is we know that the military has been hit very, very hard, that the leadership is like done, and like I think 158 ships are on the bottom of the sea, and you can say, oh, I believe them or not or whatever. But I'm just saying, if all of that we are getting reports from the Pentagon is true, and you know, okay, we'll see. We'll see. Then who's now leading the army there? And who's, handling the radio there? And now we see China putting barbed wire around their embassy. And I know through this research that Iran and China are very, very close, and that they were coming over together up through Central America to Mexico and into the United States, that was the pipeline. And with other things, but I want to there's so many variables to all of this and aspects to all of this, but the main point is that they are allies, very close allies to China. How can Iran have a equal reciprocal relationship with China? I know that Iran has the fuel, but can Iran be respected by China as a sovereign country? Or would there be infiltration into Iran also, even by their ally, and be controlled? And that's really the question that this video leads to, I believe. So that brings up, okay, the pallets of money. Who were they? The pallets of money that Obama gave Iran, who were they really for? There's just a lot of questions there. And this blockade is just, they wanted a blockade. I mean, now they have a blockade, and I haven't looked at the latest because of all the other news and everything else happening, preparing for the lawsuit. But this blockade can be just a total windfall for the United States and for the power of the US dollar. It's just amazing. Um, um, Amazing news on that one. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. Um, so per tanker, they were, you can get close to 2 million barrels on one tanker. And that comes out to like 100, and it can be $100 million or more per tanker. That's a lot of money. And that's why when you think of $100 million, I mean, here it says almost $140 million of revenue. And then Iran was charging 1 to 2 million. 2 million was the last time I heard per tanker, right? So, okay, you can go through with your 100, 130, $140 million worth, but give me 2 million for letting you go through the Strait of Hormuz, right? Now they are all coming to the United States, at least 121 of them. That's a load of money. That is so good for the Americas, especially the United States. So I don't know if President Trump planned it that way. If he did, it's just absolutely brilliant, because they also were Iran was selling the money in yuan, okay? Not reals, not the Iran reals, but the Chinese yuan. That's why I'm wondering who's really leading Iran? Is it the Iranian, or are they captured? Are they a captured people? It's really a good question, isn't it? Because they're selling in Bitcoin and gold too, but in renminbi, the Chinese yuan, bypassing the US dollar. So that was weakening the dollar. Now, by absolutely flip-flop reorganizing the entire energy world trade, I think that needed to be. I think that needed to be, because so much fuel was being siphoned and then stolen. Let's siphon from Pemex, right? And then Pemex just had a refinery in Houston go up in flames. But anyway, I didn't know they were in Houston. So that tells you how close, because Pemex is the Mexican state-sponsored fuel, right? So they're getting their oil refined in Houston, Texas. Can you believe it? Anyway, that was something today. I have to look more into it. But Pemex was getting siphoned billions of barrels and being sold through Grupo Carvel, and then sold back to Maru Campos's administration of the Chihuahua government, then to, even if it was already Mexico's oil, they were recycling it like they do these bodies. They were trying to, like the banks do, make as much profit as you can by reselling a house loan or something. Oh my goodness, it's just crazy what they were doing with the oil. And no wonder oil prices are so high, because each time they flip-flop it, or they sell it and steal it and sell it, they want a profit. I think it takes like 10 cents to get a barrel of oil out of the ground. The ground makes it, right? The ground makes it. We're in a magnetic world. The ground makes the oil. It's, I believe it's a total falsity to call it fossil fuels. The ground makes it. It seeps it. It's just, that's the way it is. And, 10 cents to get it out of the ground. And then they exploit it. They exploit it, and and then we find ourselves in this situation. So, and where we have to fight for justice, because we all need energy, right? So, this is an act of war. And by letting it go and turning our back, or just saying, oh yeah, well, let them have it, it's no big deal. And, what's 500,000 children getting trafficked? I mean, why isn't the news absolutely demanding justice for that? For the intake center, for the contractors, because we know that Marine General John Kelly's business was providing supplies to unaccompanied minors, migrant shelters. Why aren't those audited? If all these children are missing, and that we know that they were organ harvesting at the border, and we know that they were selling babies in the black market. We know all that now. So, yeah, we still have some work to do, and to get accountability, but accountability is coming. And you saw that today with Tony Gonzalez. You think, oh, is that total accountability? Well, it's a step, because we had contacted him. He knew what was going on. And he made a choice, and the choice was for the El Paso cartel. That was his choice. And it ended very badly for him. So the other is that this same El Paso cartel is at it again. Like every 5 years, they have to put a bond on top of the head of El Pasoans, put them in debt. And the same people that did it last time with La Nube, is that right? Am I saying it right? I know it's the cloud. That overran, were way over budget, because they know it's not going to get passed. And I think they wanted a bond the year right after the year of the Walmart mass shooting. And I'm thinking, wow, they passed it right after the Walmart mass shooting. Well, they didn't want, El Pasoans didn't want anything to do with it before the Walmart mass shooting. And then after the Walmart mass shooting, and I think it was for a police department, or a new police department or something. I have to look through my notes on that one. But yeah, they put a bond through and put El Pasoans in debt, and don't really look at repairing the infrastructure of El Paso. And they just want to do, something else. And this time it's a debt, a debt deck, yeah, over the I-10. And this is the same group. This is the same El Paso cartel. This is the same El Paso Community Foundation, the Narco El Paso Community Foundation, the Narco El Paso Matters. The Narco now, this time, It is the narco El Paso Norte, right? Yeah, it's the same group. It's the same, playbook that they have, and they're going to leave the taxpayers holding the bill. The El Pasoans holding the bill. And my thing is why don't they take a page out of President Trump's book? Look at, and I think this is one of the great things about him being so, targeted all the time. I mean, he's always targeted. So he has to find these brilliant ways to get things done. And, he wanted a ballroom. That's what he does. He wanted a ballroom on the White House, a place to entertain dignitaries, is just absolutely a place to hold functions and everything. And it should have been done a long time ago. And I think, I mean, I would love a ballroom, right? But I don't want to pay for it with my taxes. But I would love the White House to have a ballroom. I have lived near Washington, D.C. for years and went to Mount Vernon, one of my favorite places before they did all the stuff to it to make it a tourist attraction. Um, you know, and uh, and then it got real toxic there and everything like that. But yeah, I would like the White House, if they want one, to have a ballroom. And, they have to have the bulletproof glass and all of that. They can't just put TVs in front of the window like Cesar Haragi does. Um, yeah, so, but I don't want to pay for it. So what did he do? He got donors. He got wealthy donors. And that keeps him under budget, ahead of schedule, because the donors are not going to put up with all, oh, we're going to do this for $170 million. Oh, no, I forgot to tell you it's 400 million. Oh, no, it's 750 million. See, donors don't put up with that. But this is what they've been doing to El Pasoans. And so I think what is that, 300 million for the ballroom, and taxpayers, the Americans, they're going to get a really good deal. They're going to not have to pay out of their taxes for this ballroom, but the White House gets a ballroom. And that's really wonderful when you want to be a respected country in the world. So I don't know why these philanthropists that go onto their Forbes and say, like Paul Foster, I'm so wealthy, I've done so well, I'm a billionaire, and yet they don't want to do this debt deck. They could probably be under budget, ahead of schedule, if he just put the money out and got his cartel friends to, hey, CJNG, come on, give us some of that money for this deck we want to put over I-10. We don't want El Pasoans to be more loaded down. We've already loaded them down enough. And yeah, I don't know, understand why he doesn't do that. Get his wife, Alejandra de la Vega, over there to Mauro Campos and say, hey, write us out a special thing, right? Because you've been embezzling money. I mean, my goodness, these people. I just wanted to give a warning sign out to that, because these are the same people that are tied to the death of our son, the murder of our son. So, yeah. And I think that is really, there's just so much going on that that we're preparing for. But I think I covered tonight, and I'm sorry for coming on so late. So I will say good night to everybody. Thank you so much for your comments. They are all part of the agenda. Yes, justice is coming for our hero and his family. Thank you so much, Anicia. And you are so inspiring. Justice is coming. Thank you so much. God bless you all. Please share, because we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And that's what they fear the most, is you not sharing, you not speaking, you not seeking justice. And so thank you so much for sharing. God bless you. And I will be back tomorrow.